In this day and age, there are literally hundreds of kinds of counseling. Many are derived from the shorter list of major counseling theories you're studying, but as you've probably seen, the differences even among these theories are significant enough that it would be just about impossible and probably not even wise to try and jam them all together into one approach. It may be possible, however, to integrate certain ideas, concepts, or practices into a single approach. In this presentation, we'll cover some of the arguments for and against integrating ideas and practices from more than one theoretical approach. I'll ask you to form an opinion of your own and offer some questions that I hope will get you thinking. Next, I'll offer up two possible approaches to theory integration for you to consider. That is, if you think it's a good idea. As I share, I'd like to invite you to think about theory integration as it relates to you and how you are uniquely wired. For example, how might theory integration play out for you if you are a person who is good at adapting and likes to learn new things? What about if you value practicality or prefer to develop mastery over a single skill before moving on to something else? Let's start by asking, is theory integration a good idea or not? Well, let me pose a few questions and let's see what you think. First, is it possible? Is it possible to integrate ideas from different theories and still maintain coherence? As you know, major theories of counseling can have fundamentally different views of human nature, human health and well-being, pathology or disorder, the purpose of counseling, and how change occurs. What happens when you try to integrate theories that would appear to contradict each other on all or even some of those points? Second, do theories contaminate one another while others maybe complement each other? For example, a therapist with a person-centered approach might find the more directive approach taken in reality therapy antithetical to what is helpful in therapy. On the other hand, that same therapist might welcome concepts from narrative therapy and find they enhance the goals of the therapist. Third, how do counselors ensure that they aren't applying change strategies counterproductively or ineffectively? It requires time and energy to fully understand the rationale behind and develop mastery of psychotherapeutic techniques. Is there a way to ensure counselors can incorporate a range of strategies and also do them well? Fourth, when incorporating ideas and interventions from various theories, is there a coherent thought process counselors use to decide what they are doing with their clients and why? On what theoretical basis do they justify those decisions? What criteria is used to select those ideas or interventions and not others? Fifth, if counselors take a purely eclectic approach, how do they decide what the goal of therapy is? A theoretical orientation helps counselors know what they are aiming for or ultimately trying to accomplish. Even if the goals of counseling are left fully up to the client, that in itself is a theoretical position. Sixth, is it possible that an integrative or eclectic approach could make therapy relevant for multicultural populations? Could it even be necessary to meet the needs of minority clients? It may be possible that an integrative approach could provide short-term solutions to the lack of diversity among the founders of the most widely used theoretical approaches. Many practitioners, for example, are incorporating feminist theory as a way of making their therapy practice more relevant and ethical. Finally, is it possible to not be eclectic? Theories of counseling develop in context over time. Counseling theory is, in some ways, more of an ongoing conversation than completely original, separate, and distinct worldviews. The boundaries between theories aren't always black and white. Ultimately, many practitioners and master therapists advocate for theory integration in some form or another. It has been argued that eclectic approaches can be helpful, especially for inexperienced therapists, as a way of learning while still offering effective help. There are two ways of going about this. One is called the Waze Paradigm. The other I call a vertical approach to integration. The Waze Paradigm identifies three common denominators in most psychotherapeutic approaches: a way of being, a way of understanding, and a way of intervening. If therapists can familiarize themselves with how these three ways play out in each psychotherapeutic approach, then they can cohesively incorporate ideas from different approaches into their practice. If therapists can familiarize themselves with how these three ways play out in each psychotherapeutic approach, then they can cohesively incorporate ideas from different approaches into their practice. Let's briefly talk about each of the three ways and how they might be used in therapy. First, the way of being refers to how a therapist is in the therapy office. You may not realize it, but people shift their ways of being quite often, and I'm sure you do it too. Parenting might be one example where we might take on a stern or firm posture with kids one part of the day and a soft and empathetic posture in another. Or we might take on the posture of an expert when giving a presentation, where we would take a more curious and interested posture if we were trying to learn about someone by interviewing them. In therapy, you might shift your natural way of being to better suit a client. For example, perhaps you generally take a more directive approach where you offer your thoughts, opinions, and advice more freely. You might exude confidence that usually helps clients feel hopeful, but you notice your client seems to be shutting down in your sessions. So you adapt by changing your way of being. You decide to take a more non-directive approach, listening patiently, speaking more tentatively, and letting your client work things out and generate their own ideas and opinions. Second, the way of understanding has to do with your counseling theory. Here again, you may notice that what fits for you does not seem helpful for your client. For example, there's a great deal of overlap between counseling theory and religious or spiritual understandings of human nature, health and well-being, and so forth. You may be working with a client who holds certain values or beliefs that don't align well with your natural way of understanding. Sometimes the disparity is so great that you have to refer that person to someone else. But there are other times where you may be comfortable adapting. Third, the way of intervening has to do with your change strategies. Once again, if a client does not respond to what comes naturally or makes the most sense to you, you may be able to find strategies from other approaches that could work for you and your client. You can see that the Waze paradigm can be used to better suit your approach to clients, but it can also be used for counselor development. As you adapt and try different approaches, you also learn and grow. Of course, we always have to be cognizant of the risk of doing this poorly or haphazardly, and that may be a judgment call you have to make with the help of your supervisor or colleagues. A second approach to theory integration is to choose a theory that aligns with you and who you are and resonates with the things you value most, and commit yourself to a deep and thorough understanding of it. This is what I'm calling a vertical integration approach. Imagine you were to put every counseling theory on a horizontal line. Then, when you're working with someone, you pick ideas and interventions from that line to best suit the person you're working with. It would be an eclectic approach, a way of doing integration, but one that runs the risk of lacking coherence, direction, and being too piecemeal. A vertical approach would be to pick one of the theories on that line and go down deep with it. As you dig deeper and deeper, your understanding of that approach becomes so thorough and so second nature that you begin to make sense of other theories through the lens of your chosen theory. You can borrow ideas and interventions from the horizontal line, but you can do it while still seeing through the lens of your chosen theory. In my experience, I've actually seen this happen quite naturally. I once joked with a colleague that what I saw her doing was really just a version of my own approach. She fired right back that I was doing the same. To this day, we are each convinced that the other is actually using the theoretical approach we are without realizing it. Theory integration in counseling is an ongoing topic of discussion for therapists. Is it wise to incorporate ideas from other approaches? Or, on the other hand, is it wise not to incorporate ideas from other approaches? And if you do, how do you go about it? In practice, I know very few practitioners who don't integrate approaches in one way or another. Regardless of how you choose to put counseling theory into practice, I invite you, as always, to use the integrative process as a means of building self-awareness. I encourage you to not only notice what psychotherapeutic approaches feel most natural to you, but also what aspects of those approaches feel most natural. Also, be mindful of your preferred approach to theory integration. You might learn something about yourself along the way.